Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume.
And I'm Scott McCandless. It is the week of November 13th, and this is your Monday briefing.
We're going to talk about the government funding deadline, which is this Friday, but want to highlight a few things before we get into that conversation.
In addition to the Friday deadline, we also have on our radar the proposed foreign currency regulations, which were released last week and will be covered in a separate episode this week, as well as in an upcoming Insight. Also, the U.S. and China are expected to meet on Wednesday at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, Summit in San Francisco. Sindhu had a chance to speak with Craig Strongberg about the pressures and priorities surrounding the meeting, and you'll find that episode in the email with this episode, as well as on our website.
You'll also find a conversation about artificial intelligence and governance with Sean Joyce and Jennifer Kozar. And now, the November 17th deadline for government funding is midnight on Friday. Over the weekend, House Speaker Mike Johnson announced a two-step plan to avoid a government shutdown. So, Scott, I want to talk to you.
Sure.
The plan that he has proposed leaves out aid to Israel and to Ukraine, and for some, that is a deal breaker. So, talk about what the plan is and its viability.
Sure, Sindhu. Speaker Johnson came to power. He went from Congressman Johnson to Speaker Johnson with an overwhelming show of support from his caucus. Now we get to put that to the test, because what he's proposing is essentially a clean CR, or continuing a resolution. And by clean CR, what we mean is it really does very little more than extend current policy funding and funding at the FY23 levels. This is almost exactly the situation that got former Speaker McCarthy into trouble. So it's going to be an immediate test of Speaker Johnson's leadership and whether he can hold his caucus together. But this plan that he's proposed, in addition to being clean, has essentially two steps to it, as you mentioned, and that is to extend it into January and February and split it into multiple pieces, those two tranches, if you will, one to January 19th, the other to February 2nd. Somewhat ironically, also Groundhog Day,
right?
Because it does feel like we're doing this all over again. So that is part of the test as to whether that bifurcated system that he has set up is going to be acceptable to the caucus.
All right, thanks for that overview. And our viewers are also looking for a year-end tax package or signs of it. With everything that's going on, the mixed reviews that this plan has gotten, what are the chances of that? And is a potential plan going to be on or off the radar?
Sure. One thing that we need to start with is to remind our viewers that a tax plan will almost certainly not move by itself and is looking for some other vehicle. So those potential milestones include this Friday, the November 17th. Could it ride on whatever Congress tries to pass before that particular deadline? That seems unlikely. It seems a little bit too quick, although it's not a 0% chance, but it seems unlikely. So then the next date you would have to look at actually comes from the Senate, which seems to be wanting a CR that runs until December 15th. So maybe that provides an opportunity. And then the next would be, of course, a completely different bill that might materialize in December, because there are some things that have been proposed to be in the CR that would take care of some government funding issues, and others that aren't included at all, right, including funding for the FAA, Federal Aviation Authority, some flood insurance programs, some Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the FISA laws would have to be extended. Those aren't included, so maybe they come back in another package in December anyway. And then finally, the last milestone would be, if the House does prevail on its position, could January 19th possibly be a time when the tax package could ride along? So each one of those is fraught with risk for the tax package, but they're really the only opportunities that present themselves as we sit here now.
It's only 4 days, but it seems like it's intense wait and see.
It does. Yeah.
So walk us through what's going to happen at 12:01 midnight if the plan doesn't go through.
Sure. What typically happens as you get closer to a prospective shutdown is the administration will start to release some guidance as to which parts of the executive branch are considered essential and which aren't. Well, certainly TSA and things like that would continue to operate, so planes will remain flying. We can assure our viewers of at least that aspect of it. But other parts of the government will start to see some absences and some shutdowns. That typically hits places like national parks. And interestingly enough, that tends to be something that alarms constituents quite a lot.
Sure.
When they want to go to the national park, they find it closed, quite literally gates barred and rangers gone. They can't go to those things. That tends to light up the proverbial congressional switchboard. So there'll be pieces of the government that will continue to operate, others that will start to shut down.
Sure.
Now, when we look back to some of the shutdowns in the past, there was the largest and longest lasting in recent memory was 2018, 2019. went for about 35 days. Something on the order of 800 to 900,000 federal employees were furloughed for part of that or all of that time. So it can be quite significant, can have an impact on the economy if it lasts. But we'll start to see some rolling absences from some of the federal jobs, potentially as early as this weekend.
Okay, so let's talk about next steps.
Sure.
I know that when you walk out of the studio today, you've got a slew of calls.
Okay.
What are you talking about with companies?
Well, directionally, I think one of the things that we want to focus on is making sure that this tax bill remains top of mind for everyone in Congress. Because like I said, there aren't that many opportunities to which a tax package could attach. So they need to make sure that they're ramping up as much as they possibly can the noise in congressional ears on and off the tax writing committees to make sure that the tax package remains a top priority.
Right.
Without that, it could easily fall by the wayside. And we're getting to a point where if we don't get this done, say in this calendar year or in early January, the slippery slope into 2025 could happen faster than any of us want to digest. We don't want that to happen. We need to keep the pressure up on the tax package.
Right. And thanks so much for that.
Pleasure.
Any notes for our viewers?
Yes, as a matter of fact, for our viewers, Mark Prater shared his insights on Friday's Week in Review, and that is included in the description of this episode as well. We're staying close to what's happening in Washington, and we'll talk more about it later in this week in the next Week in Review.
And thank you as always for spending this time with us. Stay with Policy on Demand for the latest developments from Washington and around the world. Take care.